Hello and welcome to the Auto Guide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. This week we talk a lot about V8s, Porsche maybe bringing back a crazy 911, and we have a few new features. But first, a word from our sponsor. Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything, brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love. Okay, so kicking it off is something we seem to have talked about at least every other week since, I don't know, November. But one of my predictions for the year that it was the way outside shot may actually happen. And guess what? Dodge might put a Hemi in the Charger. Now, I didn't think it'd be a Hemi that would go in when I said a V8. I said something new, but, you know, new pistons, new head, maybe they can meet emissions. It makes me think the EV Charger isn't doing so well, which I don't think it ever was going to, but the six pack sounds cool. So I don't know. I guess maybe they know they need like a SRT top line with the Hemi. Like I don't think it would be regular Hemis. It'd be like some crazy 6.5 liter supercharged monster.
I have a lot of thoughts about this. First, I mean, it's way too early to say if the electric Charger is a success or a fail. At this point, it's been on sale for 2 months officially. I just was looking at one today for reasons we'll get into later. The i6 does sound cool. The Hurricane, I think that sounds like a pretty sweet setup. And aren't most engines technically Hemis now these days? Really? There was an interesting interview about this from another outlet where they talked about they talked to the new Dodge CEO, and he said something along the lines of like, if you want a V8 Charger, go buy some at the dealerships. Like there's still plenty on the lots, like the last calls and stuff. It's like this idea that Dodge has to have a V8 Charger. It's like I think this is definitely one of those internet commenter things of, yeah, it sounds great, but how many people are buying them? It's if it happens, great. I mean, they give people choices and that's good. But I think to your point, it'd probably be special editions. It'll kind of be like the 392, either the Durango or the Wrangler, right? Where it's like, this is the end. Oh, wait, no, this is the end. Wait, hold on. Guys. Final edition.
Yeah, well, to his point about go buy one at the lots. Like those are final edition. They're stupid expensive for what you get. But the V8 Hellcats and whatnot were like the halo that got people in. But Dodge sold a ton of RTs with just the regular Hemi, which I don't think it's going to get because I think it's 440 and 540 or something for the regular and the high output. So those powers are already kind of covered. So yeah, the only way you're going is to the top unless they replace it. But then that's just not good business sense. You've spent all this money to develop it. Like,
yeah,
if anything, the Charger needs a base engine. Like, where's the regular Pentastar so you can sell it to not used cars, to rental fleets and whatnot? And that's probably coming down the road. When I said the EV Charger is not a success, I mean, I don't think it ever was going to be. Like, I don't think Dodge had any ambition that it was going to sell in decent numbers even. But it was just
it's going to sell like a fraction of the total. Yeah, that I think was always going to be the case.
And even there, I think like it's cool, and I know they had to do it because like it's such a muscle car name and this and that. But there's no like low power kind of regular version. Like you're starting. Well, I guess if you get the what's the base one? The RT without like the stage
or something.
Yeah, without the stage kits, it's pretty reasonable. But
yeah,
I think it's really their fan base wants there to be a V8. They're not necessarily going to buy the V8, but it's just it's the halo, right? It's like why does anyone build anything? Why does Toyota build Supras? It's not to make a ton of money. It's so people will be like, oh, they make Supras. Now I'll take that Corolla over there. It's the halo effect.
Yeah, I guess, but it's weird. I mean, like, cool for the people who are gonna want one, and all the people who can't wait to make it their second owner vehicle.
Yeah, well, I also think of the V8 like it would go in the Ram. they wouldn't make a new V8 or bring it back for the Charger. So if they're already sort of
Yeah.
contemplating that, even though again the Hurricane engines make crazy power in the Rams, but look at Ford, they can't drop the 5.4 because how many? It's been like a decade of EcoBoost, I think at least, but they still have a rabid base that won't go to a Turbo 6. They need that V8. So
Yeah, that's true. EcoBoost debuted what, right around like right after the first Raptor. So
yeah.
yeah, it's been 15 years or so.
So yeah, I think, and that's, I mean, the nice thing is that's probably what's helping keep the Mustang alive. Is they need the V8 for other things, so like, yeah, might as well keep making it. So
Yeah.
didn't work for the Camaro though.
Womp womp.
Yeah. So moving on, Chevy has killed off the Blazer, or they're about to kill off the Blazer. That's the report, and it says popular midsize crossover. I mean, it sold well, but again, like, what was fleet versus retail? Because this was there was some very entry level. I get sort of Chevy's thinking though, and I said it before, like they have a lot of vehicles that start to cross over each other. But that was a GM thing back in the day, and that's what kind of hurt them. But when you go tracks to Trailblazer to Equinox, then the Blazer, and then you're up to the Traverse. The Traverse is still big, but it doesn't seem as big, I think. Like, I just think, I don't think that middle section exists. I mean, we've talked about it many times. Like the Edge, like the Outback does well because it's different. But like Venzas, Edges, Accord Cross Tours, like where are they now?
Yeah, and that, like you said, Outback is different. And I think to get any level of success in this weird somewhere between the mainstream, we call them compact, but they're not anymore. But yeah, like Equinox and Traverse, to be in between that, you need a unique angle, and the Blazer has an old name. That's its unique angle. That's it. I can't think of any reason I would recommend it over the other choices in that class. Like Crown Signia is different. It's very wagon-esque. The Murano is stylish. It's such a small segment. And the Passport is going all rugged. So I think, if I'm remembering right, this rumor also mentions that maybe it could be reborn as more of a actual Blazer, like a rough and tumble kind of thing, right? And that might be the angle.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've heard that rumor too, and it makes sense. You need to kill off this car or rename it, but Ford did that once, and that's just a nightmare. But yeah, this segment, it seems like it's like what's old is new again, where everyone's going back to these. If you want a Turo SUV, it's going to be off-road bias. So you have, like, obviously you have the 4Runner and the Land Cruiser. Toyota has two of them, and not the Ranger, the Bronco came back, and although it's more like a Wrangler, really hardcore, like I said, Honda's going more with the Passport, and every other SUV is getting a ruggedized version. Like, I don't even think Chevy would necessarily have to build this off of the Colorado. Like, if you got a shrunk down Traverse with what they've kind of done with the Z71 package, like it's a crossover, not an SUV, but it's pretty capable. So yeah, like it would make more sense. Just bring back a big block and call it the Blazer, and yeah.
Because my question about this is, if you kill off regular Blazer, do you rebadge Blazer EV as just Blazer?
I don't know. And I mean, that could be part of it too, is they have the Blazer and the Blazer EV, and neither are like setting the world on fire. So it's like, why have two? And there's more investment in the EV side, and this could come back as a hardcore. I'd love to see it come back as, like, not the S10 Blazers that we grew up with in the 90s and early 2000s with the roundy lights. Like, make it look like the 80s Blazer.
Yeah.
Like
give it a removable roof.
Like Ford did with the Bronco Sport. Like, kind of make it, that's where they need to go. And I think Chevy's, like, they have nothing. GM has nothing in that segment, and I think they're seeing, like, oh, the Bronco's been successful, and everyone else is going that way. Like, yeah, I think it'd be good for GM. So hopefully, I could bring back the K5 name. So back to V8s. So America says the BMW V8 is here to stay.
So I have a question. Like, what?
America.
The nation just told Germany, like, told BMW, look, you have to keep making the V8. I mean, was there a chance that it wasn't going to continue? I'm under the impression that with the new plug-in powertrain, the V8's good for a while.
Yeah, I think that's what they're saying is how Mercedes jumped out of the V8s to all these crazy turbo
Oh,
4 hybrid things, and Audi's kind of getting out. Like BMW's committed, like, no, our M cars are going to keep using V8s. They might be
well,
8,000 pound hybrids, but they'll still be
except
V8s.
except the
And
M3, it'll still be an inline six.
yeah, but I was going to say they could shove it back in the M3. I like that
No, keep
V8
the
M3
inline
sounds
six. The
so good.
inline six is the right choice. And there will be two M3s anyway. There's going to be the electric one and the gas one.
Well, the nice thing about the V8 is you could go back to an NA M3 theoretically. I know they're all turboed right now in BMW, but it's just you're putting so much weight on the front nose of the M3s now. They're not like they used to be, but that's just old man complaining.
Well, and
I
like
guess
every vehicle has moved up a class. Like if you want an old M3, you get an well, not this M2, but the previous M2.
oh, the V8 and the M2. There we go.
They'll never do a naturally aspirated V8. I'm saying it now.
Yeah.
I'm calling it. BMW will never do another naturally aspirated V8.
Well, there's no point, right?
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
crank up the boost on your six, and
And
yeah,
and I just want to clarify, this is a fantastic engine. Like the turbo V8 in the BMW, like you drove it in the X7. I've driven it in a bunch of different vehicles recently. It is so impressive, and I'm glad to hear that they're doing this. But there we go. But yeah, like I'm not surprised. It's weird to me. I'm like I thought this was a sure thing for a while anyway.
yeah. I guess it's just reassuring that
Okay.
in case people were worried. The best vehicle I drove the new BMW V8 in was the Range Rover. It was just so nice in that.
There you go.
All right, so V8s. This one now turbocharged. Hey, we just talked about that. So as we've predicted and mentioned, the ZR1 is starting to do its world tour. I think this was my number one prediction that would happen for sure.
Yeah, this was
prediction
a
show.
foregone conclusion, really.
So they went and set, I think, 5 records in 5 different tracks around. And it's like, yeah, just to start. And if you look at the times, it's not like, oh, we beat them by a 10th. It's ridiculous chunks they took off. And then you see who did them. They're like lead engineer, technical engineer. Like we're not talking they went out and got some hot shoe professional race cars. It's not like Max Verstappen's ripping these around. I mean, these guys can drive, don't get me wrong, but it just shows how capable this car is. And it seems more approachable than I thought when you look at 1,000 horsepower rear drive. But Corvettes have always done that. They've always put out so much power compared to the competition, and yet you never hear stories like the Viper where it's trying to kill you.
I have heard, this is secondhand, right? Because this was before my time in the industry, but I have heard that the previous generation ZR1 was actually too much power. I've heard that became
So it gave it more.
well, I heard like unless you know what you're doing, like it became uncomfortable because like that was the limit of what that chassis could do, right? The C7 was still front engine, but this sounds like the capability has just skyrocketed up. And yeah, like you said it just a few seconds ago, and it still breaks my mind that there is a 4-digit horsepower Corvette that is rear drive, and you can just buy it, and it's not terrifying. It sounds like it's super capable, and it holds its own, and it's demolishing track records, and I just think that's kind of awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if you drive the car like terribly and over its limit, it's obviously going to be not fun to drive. But any Corvettes like that, like we're talking base Corvettes are almost at 500 horsepower.
I was gonna say is like this move to mid-engine. Like, I have my thoughts about the look of the C8, but it's such an approachable, friendly mid-engine car that like it. No wonder this is doing this. Like, yeah, you doubled the power, but the 500 one, the base 495 is one of the most approachable 495 horsepower vehicles you could possibly think of.
Yeah, and like back to the C7, even those from Z06 down were totally drivable. But like I said, 755, like that was sort of the limit. It's what I like the most about this. It's funny you keep talking about the approachable. It's like this is the most clickbait thing I can say, but it's like the modern NSX where it's an approachable supercar.
the stats when this came out, when the first C8 showed up and it was like 495, it's like, well, this is basically a Ferrari 430 that is, approachable and friendly, for 60 grand when it launched.
But anyway, my favorite thing about this is it says advanced in several ways, but like the GT3 RS is what has a lot of these records because that car is crazy. But this is such the American thing that the Corvette used to do, where the GT3 has DRS and all these different trick things it does to get the most out. Chevy's like, here's a ton of power and some wings, and we're just going to go pummel these records by exploding down the straightaways. And that's like what the original ZR1 was like way back in the late 80s, early 90s. So good on them.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for that Nürburgring time. And I guarantee it's been there, but I think they're probably like trying to get the perfect day with the perfect driver to just set something ridiculous. Like now, remember when we talked about it, I said there's no way you could touch the Mercedes 1. I'm not so sure about that anymore after seeing some of the times it put down here. So we'll see.
Yeah.
So Porsche is thinking of bringing back the 911 Dakar, making a new one with hybrid power. So, I mean, that's a little misleading. Like, it's because the 911 has a lot of hybrid options coming. So, this one was the original Dakar. Well, not the original. The Dakar they just had was like a GTS jacked up with all the off-road bits. So it makes sense that maybe the 911 hybrid will be the perfect spot to do it as well.
And I'm sure the Dakar, the last one, printed money for Porsche. So why not do this? If there's more demand for one, satisfy that demand. Make another one.
No one does it better than Porsche, mainly with the 911, but they do it with the 718s too, where they just bring out all these different special editions that are absurd money, but people want them and they keep buying them. It's almost like back with that Charger V8 thing. Like Dodge maybe like, if we just spend a bit of money, put a V8 in, we can charge double the price and people will buy it.
Yeah,
and
why not? I mean, cool. I still want to try this hybrid powertrain in the new 911, but throw it in a new Dakar? Sure. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. We'll drive the new 911.
Yeah.
And finally, we have a new segment at AutoGuide that we are calling Hot Takes.
Hot Takes
isn't very creative, but it's basically what it is. So through the week, Kyle, myself, Michael, and Greg, we all just kind of write down thoughts and feelings and opinions we have as we hear different news stories or drive cars, and just kind of at the end of the week summarize it all in here. So I can't remember. I have a short memory, but some of the hot takes are about the Nissan Honda merger. We talked about AJAC, their car of the year was announced today. I'll let you talk about that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
And some opinions about some of the other news stories of the week.
Yes. So I've just opened up our hot takes to remind myself. And I guess I should start with the car of the year stuff, because for anyone who's watching, I'm actually wearing a collared shirt, which is unusual for this. And that's because I was just at the Canadian Auto Show, which opened a few days ago when you're listening to this. And we announced not terribly surprising cars, Mike. I think these aren't actually very hot takes, although one of them is. Car of the year in Canada is the Honda Civic, which actually just retook the crown as the best-selling car. I
was going to say it's always car of the year.
Oops. Yeah, so the Hyundai
Yeah.
Santa Fe winning utility vehicle of the year. Great. We've driven it a few times. We love it. We think it's a very affordable, very family-focused SUV. Cool. Electric car of the year was between the Fiat 500e, the Lucid Air, and the BMW i4. So guess what? The i4 won because it's sitting right in the middle of two very niche vehicles.
Because it's a car. You have a city hatch and like a luxury technological marvel. So, of course, the car is going to win. Sorry,
and then
I didn't get to say when you said Santa Fe, but like that's what we've been saying. Like it should win everything, and it is because Hyundai just found this perfect couple. But what one utility? What big off-road ready, rough and tumble SUV won car or SUV of the year? Utility.
Well, the electric utility vehicle of the year went to the most significant new launch of last year, which is, of course, the Ioniq 5N. The 641 horsepower high-performance version of the Ioniq 5, which is even less like a crossover than the original Ioniq 5, which is also barely a crossover. Look, I've said it before on this show, and I will gladly say it again. The Ioniq 5N was my favorite car last year. It is a blast, and it moves the game on. I think this is my opinion. I'm not speaking for AJAC, of course. I just want to clarify. Like, my personal opinion is that cars that should win these sorts of awards are like the fitness for purpose is off the charts. Is like the company had a target and did they deliver on it? And in my mind, the 5N nails it. It's supposed to be a fun take on EV performance, and it's like a laugh factory on wheels. So it's hard because the Kia EV9 was also a finalist, and that is an excellent vehicle as well. It delivers on what it needs to do. But yeah, you know, I don't know what else to to add to that.
Yeah, I agree, and I know the Ioniq 5 is technically an SUV to begin with, which is already pushing its luck. But this sort of blurring the lines has been happening forever. Like the first time it really became obvious, and I feel the 5 and the 5N are the exact same as I went on the Mercedes GLA 45 AMG drive. And I remember on the presentation, they said the 250 is an SUV because of its ride height, and it can have tinted rear windows and rear side windows. But the 45 was lowered enough that it was now called a car by the EPA, and it couldn't have rear tinted windows. And we're talking the same vehicle. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I would have personally picked 5N as car of the year. I mean, the i4 is really good too, but they're not far off on price, and you know, one's more significant player, and then the EV9 being my utility. But all three of those vehicles they should have. Tell AJAC we need a third category. We need performance EV of the year, just like we used to have performance car of the year.
I'm down for that. Yeah, so that's that. Mike, what other hot takes do we want to talk about on the call?
I was just looking like you were, and we actually talked a lot about them. There's about the Charger, getting the Hemi, and maybe the Blazer coming back. The last two things I'd like to say before we get to our interview is the Daytona 500 is just passed if you're listening to this, but for us, it's coming up on Sunday. And the F1 kickoff, which I've been looking forward to because it's just a no-brainer, they've never done this before, is next week, I believe. So I will definitely be tuning in to see that. It's just such a great idea. Like, bring all the teams to one place and have a big sort of gala to show off your new liveries and cars. I mean, they kind of do it at, is it practice or the first race where they line them up and do the pictures and all that? But
oh yeah, I don't know.
You know, do it here. So, and I think they're trying it out because next year's, I think, will draw a lot of attention when you have a whole bunch of new cars, new manufacturers, new everything. Like next year's is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
So I think this is sort of like almost a dress rehearsal because
Mike, that's not a very hot take.
No. Hot take is okay. So you need a hot take from it. One of the drivers won't show up.
Ooh,
I don't know which one, but there's always a no-show.
And you know what? Hold on. I just want to point out, mentioning, not mentioning. Of course, there's updates on the Nissan Honda thing, and we'll leave it at that. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Yeah, Foxconn apparently will buy out Nissan, which, you know, whatever.
We'll have an update next week.
Yeah. So this is the Auto Guide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. We are going to take a bit of a longer break right now, and when we come back, we will be talking with Connie about her career in the automotive review world and how she amassed such a following in a short period of time. So we'll be back in a second. I don't know we're going to put Greg's thing in, but maybe we'll put it in earlier.
Oh, I'm sad that I missed the Connie one too.
I think I'll put Greg in right after the intro.
I should have brought my stuff with me to the show, and then I could have apparently I could have used the VIP room for the indoor track. But yeah, oh well.
Yeah,
all right.
I should have thrown to Greg, but whatever. I will put Greg after Connie this week. Yeah,
there you go.
I'll do that.
Problem solved.
Because then it's 2 minutes, that 15-second, that yeah. All right, so I'll just do a quick. Picture this: you're in the garage, your favorite room in the house. And you're tuning up your engine with parts you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease, and because you're committed to driving that thing further than the odometer can handle, you start to think to yourself, you know what, I could probably also use some new brakes, some shocks and struts, and this baby deserves a new air filter. So you head right back to eBay. You can find any part you need there, it's unreal. From wipers and headlights to cold air intakes, exhaust systems, and even that turbo you've had on your mind. eBay is the stocked garage of your dreams. And you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. Because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major, and mods are always intense, so you need to know that these parts guaranteed to fit every time before you dive in wrench first. And in the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back, simple as that. You know what you love more than the car itself is driving it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance, and you're locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay, minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back on the road, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info and get the exact parts that fit. When you see the green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. So now that you know all that, imagine standing at that open garage door looking at your car you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible. Whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Welcome back. This week we have a special guest who doesn't really need an introduction, but I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey guys, I'm Connie Peters. I am a content creator online, social media, YouTube. I review cars.
Yes, I'm sure a lot of people are aware. I think last I checked, I did some research this week. So you have 150,000 Instagram followers and almost 300,000 TikTok followers. Is that right?
Yes, you're right on.
That's not easy to do, especially in the car industry. So that's a lot of success. So I think before we get to that, what got you interested in cars in the first place? Was it someone in the family, or was it just something you naturally were drawn to?
So I actually just grew up around cars. My dad was a mechanic and then sold cars. And so he was always tinkering. And then my husband's always been into cars. We own two classic cars. We have a 70 Chevy Nova and a 66 Pontiac GTO. So he's always tinkering. He's done some racing with the Nova. And then, so I've always been around cars. And then when I was a blogger, I had a mom blog. The car brands wanted my audience because I had a lot of Canadian parents in my audience at the time. And so then I started reviewing cars as a mom, and then slowly just transitioned. When I sold my blog, I just reached out to some publications, started doing freelance writing, and then during the pandemic started doing video.
Yeah, and like I said, you have a ton of followers, and it's not like it's you. It's not like it's some sort of site that you're affiliated with or a handle you use. Like, people just are interested in what you're doing, which is great. But before we go on, so is the Nova like the project car that you work on, and then the GTO is like the more sort of stock car?
Yeah. So he's worked on the Nova for years. We've owned it for many years, and he's rebuilt the motor like several times. So he's done a lot to it. Yes. And then the GTO we just inherited like a couple of years ago. And so all he's done with the GTO is really try to bring it back to its original state. Like, he put more, his dad had done made some changes that took it away from its real classic look and feel. So he put new tires on it, new wheels, etc. Just try to bring it back. And that's probably not a keeper for us. It's got to go eventually. It's just taking up space, unfortunately.
That's too bad. This is a great car. I personally like the 69 style because it's more like the classic muscle car style. But the early ones had such a distinct look. Like, nothing looked like the GTO. It's so easy to tell when you see it.
Yeah.
So yeah. So like I said, you just started reviewing cars for the manufacturers, and you got rid of your other blog, so you had another successful one. How do you think you get such a big audience? Like, is it something you're just constantly having to keep track of the current trends and what people are interested in?
I will say my bottom line is just consistency, like just putting out content. It's basically like it's like it's a production. Like it's like you're just constantly producing. And I spoke with a huge YouTuber recently. I was asking him for advice and so on, and he was just saying the real key is access to cars. And so I'm really fortunate. We have a really great press fleet in Vancouver. I live in suburban Vancouver, and what that means is that the brands, the car manufacturers, generally keep a really good fleet of press vehicles here for journalists and content creators like myself to drive. So I generally have at least one manufacturer press car a week. So I'm constantly at home creating content. And then I'm fortunate enough to get included on a lot of manufacturer programs where I get to go on first drives or reveals or auto shows or even just like plant tours and things like that. So I'm very fortunate to have a constant content generation opportunity. So I'm always like, right now I have 2 cars. I shot with 1 car yesterday. I'm shooting with another car today. And so really the bottom line for me has been consistency in putting out content. So, and I tell that to everybody all the time. They're like, what's the secret to growing on Instagram? Because Instagram is the hardest platform by far to grow on for social. And I will say consistency, like just constantly putting out content. Like I probably put on average 2 reels a day on Instagram. And
wow.
For me, reels has been the key to growth. And the carousels are big now too. But regardless, that's the bottom line for me.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. Is they think you just put a video out once or twice a week and you'll get the audiences. You need to get the audience built, and then you can maybe do that later if people want longer form or content. And that's sort of more of a YouTube thing anyway. I'd say more than Instagram.
Yes.
And once someone does like your content, as long as you're consistent, like you said, they seem to stick around. But obviously they need to like what you're saying and your personality, and that seems to have really caught on. With your audience, is your audience very broad, or is it like country specific, or is it more men or more women? Do you know?
It's really broad. Like when I look at the countries, it blows me away sometimes. I don't get it. I mean, I originally started Canadian, like primarily Canadian, because my blog was really Canadian moms. That was my target audience. But since I've done mostly cars, it's really changed. It's transitioned to more American. I have a much more larger US audience now than Canadian, and more men. Because I do just talk about cars, really. I try to throw some lifestyle stuff in there sometimes, but it's mostly cars that people are there for. And I do find that like the types of cars I post about really changes the audience. So as an example, I did a Rolls-Royce Cullinan, I don't know, a few months ago. And that's like a really high-end luxury car. The spec I had was almost $600,000 US dollars. Wow. So it was insanely out of reach for most people. But that one video went viral. Well, I don't know what you consider viral, but I think it has like a couple million views or something on Instagram. And so I'm using Instagram as an example because my audience is different on TikTok as well. But that video brought me a lot of artists. So I was starting to see musicians, like verified Instagram accounts that were musicians from all over the world, because it's that type of vehicle, right? And so that audience, it's hard sometimes because I know that Cullinan video, that person who really liked that video or really, wants more of that content, they're not getting that from me all the time. Because like, for example, I'm doing a Honda Prologue today. So that audience, it's hard to just feed that same thing. I'm not like Supercar Blondie, who's always doing like just the high end, just that crazy kind of unattainable stuff. So I'm kind of all over the board, which makes it hard as well too, because then I'll get, a completely different audience that wants to know more about the Prologue than about the Cullinan.
Yeah, we're in the same situation here at AutoGuide. Like we do US primarily, but also Canada because we're based in Canada. So having to get both prices and trim names and specs, it's almost double the work, but it's good because then you get double the audience. Yes. But you're right, we're all over the map car wise. We don't usually get quite as the super high end stuff because we have a very consumer based audience. But I guess the important thing is trying to mix it up so you keep everyone, because you can't go after one segment. It's just You're not going to have a big enough audience.
I mean, you could really niche down. I know there's some platforms out there that just do EVs or just do, luxury cars or just do family cars. Like when I started, I refused when the brands were reaching out and, offering me cars to drive. I would always say it has to be a 7-seater. I have to, be able to take my whole family because I have 3 kids, and I would only do family cars. So there are, creators out there that can really niche down into a certain segment, but I'm kind of all over the place. Like I'll do a Mini and then I'll do a Ram,
Yeah, but I think that's probably part of why you've had so much success, because there's a lot of successful automotive YouTubers, Instagrammers, whatnot, but a lot of them seem to usually focus on high-end cars or sporty cars, or they're enthusiasts of every vehicle, even if it's a minivan. They talk about how it handles, but I've always said I think there's a big market that isn't served as well for people who care about how a car works, just as not an appliance, but an everyday item they need. And
exactly,
that's what I've always tried to do, because I'm the only one in my entire family that even cares about cars. So I've got a lot of the I'll talk about something and they'll just look at me like I'm crazy, and then they'll say, I love this car, and I'll be like, why? Because I can sit high in it, or I can see out. Like, it's things consumers
simple
want.
Things. Because that's what a car is. It's like what you say. It's an appliance. It's a people mover. It's a mobility tool for especially for families. Like when I'm talking about, space in the third row or space for a stroller. I mean, it is a mobility device for families and most people, everybody.
Yeah. So we've been on a couple of these automotive trips together. That's how we first met a couple of years ago. Can't remember which one, but
Subaru, I think.
Yeah, maybe Subaru or LA Auto Show. We're on both, but
yeah.
I have one son, and I don't travel nearly as much as you, and it's already, hard to schedule everything. How is it possible you can have 3 children and travel as much as you do and get all these cars? You must be like nonstop.
Well, it is nonstop, but I will say my kids are older, so it's a lot easier now than when they were younger. When they were younger, I would not have been able to travel as much as I do now. There's no way. I traveled a little bit when I had my mom blog for, again, press trips, Disney or whatever we were doing, family stuff. But a lot of the time at that point, my kids and my whole family would come along with me anyway. Mm-hmm. But yes, my kids are older. It's easier now. I wouldn't be able to travel as much as I do now when they were younger, for sure.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, my he's only in middle of grade school, but even now it's easier than, 3-4 years ago. And then when he becomes a teenager and, kids stop talking to their parents, then he'll probably be happy I go on trips.
It is hard. I mean, I will say, I told my girls the other day that I didn't have any trips on the horizon for quite a while now. It's kind of a quiet period for whatever reason. And they were excited. And I was really surprised that my youngest was so excited. She's like, yay. And I was like, really? Like, you're excited to have me home? Because she just turned 16 yesterday. And I'm like, oh, you're happy to have me home. And my middle, I owe her, I've owed her a couple of things sometime. I promised her a spa date together, and we're still supposed to get matching tattoos for her birthday. That was in November. So I have some catch up to do with them right now.
So have any of your kids caught the automotive bug? Are any of them into cars, or do they not really care?
I will say they're not into cars, but they understand it, and they get what I do, and they do have opinions. I'm happy just to be able to empower them to want them to have opinions. So my oldest definitely has more opinions than all the rest. She knows a lot because she does a lot of my video shooting for me. So we work together a lot. She also helps me with car swap. As you guys know, here in Canada, we have to pick up and drop off our own press cars on Mondays. And so Mondays can be quite hectic for me, especially if I've booked more than one press car. She helps me with that. So she helps me pick up and drop off cars. She helps me with my video. And so she's definitely formed opinions about cars and which ones she likes and doesn't like. And she involves her friends with opinions. She'll pick up her best friend and they'll go for a drive. And I love that because I feel like I'm just empowering them to know more. They don't have to become enthusiasts, but just know more about cars and how much they cost, for example, because you know what kids are like. They think we're endlessly wealthy and we can just buy them whatever car they want when they turn 16 for whatever reason. But yeah, I just want them to be more knowledgeable, maybe more know more.
Yeah, and that's good to I'm the sort of same situation. He's not really that into cars. He's young, so he can't even sit in the front seat yet. But he gives me his opinion of the back, and if it doesn't have a fold-down center armrest, it's just a non-starter for him. And the ones
That's
that can
fantastic.
lounge up, yeah, the ones that have like the lounge with the kick-up footrest or
Of
yeah,
course.
TV, he thinks those are amazing because that's his age. But that's
course.
great that they have some knowledge, because it's kind of shocking even at my age now how little people know about something they spend so much money on. But
Yes.
you know, that's what we're here for, right? To let them know.
Yes. Exactly.
So while we're talking about cars, you've probably owned a few in the past. Is there any car that you wish you'd never sold, or maybe just got old so you had to get rid of it, but just always stands out as your favorite?
No, I don't. I mean, my very first car was a Geo Metro. So that's when I learned how to drive standard or manual transmission. Love that I had that. Love that I can do that. My oldest also knows how to drive manual transmission because of that. And my middle refused to learn how to drive manual. But anyway, in terms of favorite cars, we also inherited a Mercedes-Benz SLK 350 a few years ago. It's a little two-seater roadster, convertible, hardtop. A V6, tiny little thing, but really, really fun to drive. That is our family car right now. It's a little two-seater roadster, and I love it. I love it. I never want to get rid of it, even though I don't get to drive it very often.
Yeah, is that sort of one of the last generations of the 350?
Yeah, it's an 08. So it's not,
yeah.
no, it's still kind of like older style, but I love it.
Yeah, I wasn't in the car reviewing game at that point. So I drove the next gen, and I drove a 350 and the AMG, the 55. Nice. And I like those cars. They're nice. Yeah. Because they're not full out sports cars, but they're still sporty and comfortable. And I mean, maybe I'm just getting old, but I appreciate that more now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, me too.
So going more with the current landscape, what cars, let's say in the last year or two, have really stood out to you that you were either surprised at how they were, or you figured they were good and they lived up to the expectations?
So I have, well, recently, my two favorites this year so far have been the Jaguar F-Pace SVR, which I know it's the last year for the SVR, but also it was my first time in it, and I adored that SUV. It just was everything I want in a car, because it was loud and powerful and like so much fun to drive, but it's also an SUV. So it's like, quote unquote, practical, 5-seat SUV. You can fit your whole family in there if you need to. I loved that car.
Did you have the searing red interior? Because I drove one this summer that was like all red. Everything was red.
Wish it would have had a red interior. That's one of my favorite interiors. No, it had a white leather interior, and it was gorgeous. Like, well, it was stunning. Like, I love that.
Not kid friendly, but...
No, but I will say white leather is not that bad with kids, because even if they're like, my kids were always chocolate milk everywhere, like chocolate milk spills, drops, whatever. It was a mess. But white leather you can clean, like you can wipe it down. We used to have a white leather interior, and it would get stains from blue jeans, but you can get that out. Like you can get it all out. It all comes out. So I don't think white leather is that bad. And then recently I had the LC500. So the Lexus LC500, the V8. I've driven the hybrid before, but this was my first time in the V8. And I adore that car. Just the body style, how it drives, how it sounds. Like, gorgeous all around.
Did you have the convertible or the coupe?
The coupe.
Okay. I had the convertible 2 summers ago, I think. And yeah, you're right. Like, it looks amazing. It always has. It looked like a concept car when it came out, and it's been out for many years, and it still looks great. And the V8's not the most powerful, whatever, but it sounds nice, and it's so smooth. My son, that was a car he loved. Like, it was his first or second convertible he got to really go a long distance in. Yeah. And he still talks about it whenever I get a convertible. He's always like, it's not as good as that other one.
Of course.
Yeah, I love that car.
Nothing looks as good either.
I had the SVR this summer to take to Detroit and back, and it's actually not a bad long-distance cruiser.
I believe that.
It likes gas, but it's nice, and it sounds great when you hammer it.
But these aren't cars I would buy. Like, for me, there's a big difference, and Kyle and I have had this conversation actually at a drive event recently. I'm like, to me, there's a big difference when I say, I love this car, and I would buy this car. So, like, I love those cars, but I wouldn't buy them. for me, like I would buy car is a Lexus GX. Again, I mean, a family SUV is my thing, right? And I actually tried to buy a two-door Ford Bronco Heritage last year
Nice.
from the press fleet, but I wasn't able to. Ford Canada has to send their press cars off to auction.
Yeah, we had the baby blue one with the white details and the red Ford badging in the summer, the two-door, and it was nice. I really liked it. Yeah,
I loved it.
I get what you're saying. Like my favorite car, we've talked about on the show many times right now, is the CT5V Blackwing, because for I only have a family of 3, so it fits us and my little dog.
Yeah.
It can drive like a Cadillac when everything's calm. It looks like a Cadillac, but with a sporty edge. And then if I'm in it alone, I can just go crazy when you open everything up, like the exhaust and the manual is great, or the automatic. I mean, I personally prefer the manual, but that's not in my tax bracket currently. So it's more recent, like the recent family cars that I actually could see myself buying if I didn't drive someone else's car every week is the new Prius I really like, the new Santa Fe I really like. Like there's a lot of good cars out there right now.
Yes. They're always I don't think there's any really bad new cars out there.
Yeah, those days were like decades ago when something was built poorly. There's cars that maybe not everyone gets and maybe we don't get or aren't as good as the competition.
Right.
But they're still like they're not going to leave you stranded at the side of the road within a week. I mean, yes, that happens, but that's a one-off.
That's a lemon situation. That's not a norm. And even the new base, like inexpensive cars, well, inexpensive is relative. Obviously, everything's expensive, but like even the most inexpensive cars now have great tech, great safety features. Like there's just a lot of good.
Yeah, like the car that I probably gave the poorest review in the last 2 years was maybe the VinFast VF8, and I mean it still has all that stuff. It's just compared to the competition, it's a step behind, but it's a first attempt. Like no one's gonna get it right away. But people make it sound like it's like almost like a death trap, gonna break down this and that. It's like no, it's just for the money. I'd rather buy other things, but it's still got advantage. And they were very aggressive with their leases, so I couldn't fault anyone for going with it. It's still does what you want. So have you noticed? You said like in COVID, you kind of got more into the automotive world. So I guess you've really full time in this only a couple of years now. Have you noticed any changes in like the last couple of years, or has it been pretty steady?
You mean in terms of my career, or in terms of
sort of your career, what people want to see online, what cars are hitting or not? Like we've noticed EVs were very click heavy a couple years ago, and they're starting to not be so much, it seems.
Right. I feel like it's always changing in this space, in every space, but especially in tech. Like I've been in tech since way before kids and everything, but in this space, so video, websites, online, internet, however you want to describe it, is always changing and evolving. So content creation is changing. How people view content is changing, where people view content, how long the content should be, how short the content should be, which platforms people want to be in, reading, websites, changing all the time. Like everything's always changing. I cannot believe it's been almost 5 years since I started doing video. And I actually started on TikTok, but whether it's the auto industry itself or content creation or tech, it's always changing. And I feel like we as content creators, whether you're writing or doing video or any type of content creation, you have to stay on top of what your audience wants, what you want to be creating, improving, leveraging different platforms. Like if I had just stayed on TikTok, I would be so disappointed in myself at this point, just because I think with the TikTok situation, it's going to change this year. Whether or not it goes away or stays, it's going to change. So if you put all your eggs in one basket, as an example, you're going to at some point regret it because I feel like you need to be on every platform. Like if you start somewhere, leverage that to go on other platforms or do other things. And it's the same way I feel about automotive content. Like I would love to be doing more lifestyle, and I try to incorporate that so that I'm not putting all my eggs in just automotive.
Yeah, and you've found success on multiple platforms, which is important. Some people might just automatically think, well, it's just successful on one, automatically on the other, but people aren't going to go watch the same content on two different platforms. So it's a different audience.
It is.
I've never had TikTok. I just kind of missed that boat. And Instagram, I post there and I post with our site, but not that good. So YouTube's the only thing I can really relate, because I've been doing that for over a decade. And when we started, it was quality. Like people wanted high quality production, looked good, like almost looked like a TV show. And they still wanted good content, but that was important. Whereas it's totally changed in the last decade, and people still want decent quality. They don't want a shaky camera, but it's way more important what you're talking about or what you have. So and 5-10 years from now, it'll be something completely different. I mean, YouTube could be gone, and same. We post even this on plenty of platforms, because you never know what's going to change.
Exactly. And YouTube, when you say 5 or 10 years, it could be different in 6 months. Like video and online, like everything is just always changing and evolving. So I just think that whole being flexible and being willing to try new things and new platforms, or leverage what you're already doing, like you say with this, it's so important to put it out wherever it could be applicable, because you're going to reach different audiences. And like you say, you're 100% right. I do not have the same audience on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. They're different audiences. They're different people. You don't get crossover, and people will never go, well, I hope they do, but I always link my YouTubes in my short form content. But people generally don't leave the platform they're on. So if they're on TikTok consuming your content, they're not necessarily going to go find you on YouTube and Instagram as well.
So we've talked about all these platforms. Where can people find you on the various platforms?
So I'm XO Connie Peters everywhere, on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And I'm on Threads and Blue Sky as well, but I'm not super into, text-based content. I do repurpose my content on Threads, but I haven't really done anything on Blue Sky yet.
And for those that are listening and not viewing, that's Connie with an IE. If you're trying to do it, I know that it could be spelled different ways. That's the way I would spell it, but you never know. Well, we thank you so much for coming on. It's been very insightful about how you got in the industry and about content creation, because I know there's a lot of people out there that want to try to do it or trying to do it and maybe aren't having success. So it's some good tips and bits there. And I hope people listening check out your various platforms, because your stuff I like it because I like quick content. And I think that's where people are going. Like I can learn a lot in a short period of time. I know some people prefer like 40-minute content, but that's not me personally. So anyway, thanks again. And I'd like to have you on again sometime down the road.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
Swapping out your tires? There's nothing like it. With eBay, you'll find the feel you're looking for, from smooth highway rides to grip for rough terrain. Get all the tires you need at prices you'll love. eBay, things people love. Okay, welcome back. We have Greg joining us again to talk products, and we'll have a new feature in a little bit. But first, what are we talking about this week?
Hey, Mike, I think it's very apropos to talk about first aid kits. We're both getting just walloped with snow, so you might want to have a first aid kit in your car before you go. So it seems like a good time to talk about it.
Yeah, and they obviously come in all sizes and content. I mean, you could have a suitcase style first aid kit or one that fits in the glove box.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of two approaches here. We have a nice story here, a nice wrap up where you can check out all sorts of ones. You could just like 2 clicks order one online. I kind of like this $299. It can't be a 300 piece. It's got to be $299 piece first aid kit. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Bandages, gloves, gauzes, ointment, all sorts of things that you might need. I think that's a good one. There's also a nice Coleman one on here that I think a little bit smaller, but might fit in the glove box, or even that sort of wheel well of your crossovers we all seem to be driving in the back, the wheel well in the cargo hold. So those are a couple of good ones. Or, what you could do is make your own. I usually drive around with some Advil, bandages, ointments, and other basic things that you might need, sunscreen, if you were to find yourself in a dicey situation. It sort of depends a little bit on what your daily commute looks like, just how risky could the situation be. If you're just driving 2 miles to your kid's school, you maybe buy one off of one of our, one of the ones we have here on our list, you're probably pretty good to go. but you also might want to customize that, add on to it, especially if you like at different points in my life. I had to commute like 40, 50 miles in this like sort of snow apocalypse that we're both sitting in. And that was no fun. There were definitely parts of that where things could go sideways. You know, you're going on multiple expressways, back roads, and that's where you're going to want to really even build out things like flares, maybe some sand. Always have a flashlight, regardless of where you get your first aid kit from, and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, like, this is a first aid kit, whereas a lot of people will get a roadside kit, but they won't think of the first aid side. And the roadside kit I had in my cars for years when I used to do like 100 miles a day when I was a driving rep. It had everything. It was huge. It was had a handle and it opened up, had like a little shovel for if you got stuck in the snow, and jumper cables, which we'll talk about one week because those are important. And it had a whole first aid kit with pretty much everything you mentioned, and some scissors. And one of them even had one of those thermal blankets that looks like kind of like tinfoil. So now with my very old car, I mean, it's 15 years, it's not that old, but I drive it so rarely, but I need it every week. I have a kit in there just in case. And one thing, as you've mentioned, we both live in the snow belt, that I've made sure I've had in for the last decade or so, because I used to not, as a blanket. It's underrated how important a blanket could be, because if you are on a highway and you get stuck in the snow and no one can get to you, your car is only going to keep you warm for so long. So both my cars now always have a blanket just in case.
That's a really good call. And if you're looking to upgrade beyond some of these basic first aid kits, you know, which are, you know, anywhere from like $19 to $20, $30, you could do more like you mentioned, Mike, the First Secure Emergency Roadside Kit. That's actually number 5 on our list. It's about $90. And that's where you get some, you know, things for like medical treatments, but also, hey, there's some things in here that might help you get out of a tricky situation. If you need to maybe get like, you need some assistance getting there, you know, things like a portable air compressor, tire repair kit, and a tow rope, and a window breaker in case there's no rocks around where your car perhaps breathes its last. So, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can scale it depending on how much thought you want to put into it and how much money you want to spend. Like some people, and I think this is not a bad move, spend the $20, get it from, you know, click through, throw it in your car, and at least you're set. You've done more than probably half the people, right? So, but I would encourage, especially on a day like this, to think twice before you head out on the road and what's in there, depending on the situation.
Yeah, and I think it's important too for people to understand sort of the scope of what they're for, because many may think, well, I don't need a first aid kit in my car. Like if I get injured in a car accident, I'll need something more serious. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. It's not just for when you're driving. It's if you're out at a restaurant or up at a cottage or camping or anywhere, and someone needs a bandage or some gauze or whatever, you know, it's always in your car, and you just go get it. And your car will be with you if you drove there. Whereas if you have it in a certain bag or a wallet or something, it might not be with you. So it's important for that reason too. I mean, I've used mine plenty of times, and never when I'm actually driving.
I think that's a funny example. I'm thinking of our family trips up north into a part of, I'm based in Michigan, called the UP, the Upper Peninsula. It's pretty far north. It's north of a good chunk of Wisconsin. It's north of a good chunk of Ontario. It's up there. And, you know, we'll go family adventures to the beach. We'll go on hikes and things like that. And you're not necessarily in your car, but it seems like somebody's always hurt. Somebody always gets bit by something. Somebody's stung, bleeding. You get back to the car, first aid kit's there for you. That's where you have the ointment, the aloe, things like that. You might want to cover up whatever critter maybe took a bite out of, you know, a member of your family. And it's important to have. It's also good to have things like pinchers, pliers, tweezers, things like that. You never know when like a tick or something is going to be on you. And that's where these things can really come in handy. Because again, I'm thinking of this beach adventure we went to. There is no urgent care. There is no doctor. You call 911. They're like, okay, you hang on. We'll be there in a while. So you need something if things go sideways. It's exactly why you don't drive somewhere in shorts in weather like this, you know, because if you get stuck and you're wearing, you know, cargo shorts, you're in trouble. So words to live by.
Yeah, I mean, I do see people in shorts in this weather, but you just mentioned a good one that I have in both my cars, and it's very regional specific, but tick keys, like crucial, because you don't want that to stay on you if you have one, and the keys needed to get it off so you don't accidentally leave the head and the teeth in. But moving on, you have something else to talk about this week that we've just started on AutoGuide.
Yeah, nice transition. We are sort of soft launching a listings experience, which means some of the pretty cool listings that our forum users are putting out there. They list their cars on all sorts of the different communities, part of the Fora, the Vertical Scope company, which owns AutoGuide and a bunch of other sites. Every day I basically look at this Slack channel. We have our communications messaging thing, and there's a lot of cool stuff in there. So we thought, hey, we might want to share this, with our readers and with our listeners. The one that came to mind most recently, it just popped up this week, was a Chevy SS 2015, pretty low mileage, under 13,000, 6-speed manual, which I remember driving that. That was a handful. That was a wristful trying to work through those gears. The SS was sort of Chevy's last attempt at a V8 powered, like bigger car, like a sports sedan, something different than the Camaro or the Corvette. I really like this. They brought this over from Australia. It was genetically somewhat related to the Pontiac G8, although I remember at the time, and this was 10 years ago, it wasn't exactly A to B. Like the chassis were slightly different, but same general idea, especially for all those Pontiac fans that, were sad to see the G8 go by the wayside. So you can check this one out. It's not cheap. It's listed for, we'll call it 52. If you're interested, you can check out the story on our site. I tend to think that's a lot for a Chevy SS. I think I would find other ways, like, I don't know, a Porsche, if I had 52 that I was going to spend on like a fun car. But this one it's right in probably that delta between collector, I guess if these things actually make it to the collector space, and daily driver. Because I think a car like this, because it's rare, but it's also not super like unique. Like it competed against things like the Charger, the 300, any sort of rear wheel drive muscle available at the time. So the segment itself was fairly ubiquitous. So this one's in great shape. Those wheels look great, polished. It's a nice, shade of red that you might remember Chevy. I forget if they called it Victory Red, but it seemed like it was on all the Camaros and Corvettes back then. It's a nice example. It's pricey. So if you want to check that out, we have it on the site.
Yeah, in Canada, we never got this or the GTO, which made us sad. We did have the G8 and the GT with the V8. So this, I actually got to drive on an event once too, and you're right, it was a lot of fun. This was like a whole Holden Commodore just transplanted and rebadged. Like they didn't really change it, whereas the G8 was a unique sheet metal and whatnot. Just like the GTO was pretty much a new grille and badge as well when it came over. Yeah. But I think the problem for the SS was it was the SS. Like it was a V8 loaded up, and that was it. It didn't have the V6 rental grade or commuter grade like the Charger and 300 did that allowed it to survive. And I think because it kind of was a flop, that's why it is getting pricey, because there weren't that many made, especially with the manual. So I think this trim will be somewhat collectible, and they probably will find some Chevy fan to pay close to that for it because they just want it. But you're right, it might be a little too early to really be getting the collector money, but that's for buyer and seller to find out. I really appreciate these cars and kind of wish we had it. We had the CTS or CTS V, which I guess was the closest we could have to about 400 horsepower and manual back in the day.
Yeah, it was a lot to handle. I think General Motors really did a great job with those, making this kind of real meat and potatoes, like raw experience with horsepower. But at the end of the day, outside of you mentioned Cadillac, most people, I think even most Chevy buyers, weren't really looking for this. I remember General Motors vice chairman and product czar Bob Lutz was always talking about doing like this exact car. They had sketches, I think, that they never were able to do, obviously, because of like the financial troubles. But they always wanted to do something like this for Chevy, and they kind of did it a little too late. By the time this thing got out there, like the Malibu, while still a solid seller, wasn't necessarily in vogue anymore. Sedans were going by the wayside. I would argue that you still, if you want to do it, you can still get some volume with a sedan. Like I read somewhere, I think on AutoGuide, in fact, one of our stories about how the Malibu was still top 3 in Chevy sales, ton of fleet, probably a ton of discounts. I don't know. I'm not sure I would be so quick to knock off my number 3 seller, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I like big sedans with power. So
Yeah, and Cadillac has been saying for a couple of years that their sedan segment sales keep going up. But anyway, we will have a different car next week, as well as a different product. So I look forward to that, and have a great weekend.
All right, Mike. See you later.
All right, so that new segment should be interesting on AutoGuide. We'll see if it works with all the used cars. So Kyle, just quickly before I wrap up, let's just talk about what we've been doing and what's coming up. So you already mentioned you're at the auto show this week, but we were also comparing two, I can't even say two minivans, because one of them technically is not according to the manufacturer. The Kia Carnival against the Toyota Sienna, and for the first time ever, they're both hybrid.
Yes. Yeah, the Sienna's been that for a while now, but Kia brought out a hybrid. I drove it a few months back, and so now we actually get to see how it faces off against the king of the hybrid minivans. I mean, there's only 4 minivans total. So
one of the other ones already was hybrid, but it was a very different world of the plug-in hybrid.
Yeah, technically there's 5 because Chrysler sells a second decontented one, but whatever.
Technically there's 6 because there's this big Volkswagen thing that has sliding doors too, but it's again very different and very differently priced.
Yes. So it's been a really fascinating week, actually. I've been enjoying it, and we were talking at the show actually about how minivans seem to be on the up. So that'll be a fun one. And then Mike, what are we in next week?
I just one thing to add, like that, since they've gone all-wheel drive more so, I think like jack them up a bit, all-wheel drive, and people buy them. Next week we are doing our own reviews. I am in a Mercedes-Benz, and I talked about the GLA earlier. Well, it's a sibling to it. I am in the CLA 45 AMG, so the big one. Last year I got in the 35, and I commented on how it was a really good sweet spot, and it was sort of like if you want to get a little more sophistication and luxury compared to Civic Type R, because the Integra Type S wasn't around at the time. It's a good alternative. So this one, though, is going real crazy with the crazy powerful turbo 2-liter.
I feel like the Integra was around. Anyway.
Maybe I hadn't driven it
last year? Yeah, I don't think you had yet. And then I'm in the Genesis GV80 Coupe, which is something that one of our contributors drove last year. You drove very briefly at one of our events a few months ago, and I'll be spending a week with it to see how different it is from the regular one.
So we're both in coupes that aren't actually coupes.
Exactly.
Four-door coupes.
Words don't mean anything anymore.
And I don't. The CLA doesn't say coupe on the back, at least, but it's definitely called that. This is where you find it, Mercedes website. I'm always trying to find it. Like, where's the CLA into sedans? Oh, right, it's in coupes. But anyway, well, that wraps up another edition of the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. We will be back next week. We have a special guest that I think a lot of you will know, so I'm looking forward. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, actually, so I'm really looking forward to it. And we'll have some more news and discussion with Greg. So until then, we'll see you.
So long, everybody.
Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love.